if they were deficient. So.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like putting the Band-Aid on before you even know why it's bleeding.
Right.
Okay, we're live. All right. Good evening. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. My name's Ruby from Real Dog Box, and I'm here with Dr. Betsy from Innovative Pet Labs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for
Thank
having
you for joining
me.
us this evening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you guys are just joining in, we are going to be talking to Betsy about Innovative Pet Lab and some of their tests. I have one here right in front of me, which is the comprehensive review. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I wanted to bring her on because we get a lot of questions about gut health, about inflammation, and different ways we can identify that our dogs are suffering from certain conditions and what we can do once we have those results. And while we wait for others to trickle in, just so you guys know, when we do our lives, we try to go for about 30 minutes. And then at 1:30, we'll open it up to a Q&A, open up to everyone. But if you have some questions and you want to drop them in the feed, we will bring those up and we will be replaying this live, both on Facebook and on YouTube. So Dr. Betsy, I know you've been in clinical lab education and research for quite some time. Tell me about yourself. What's your story?
I got a degree in nutrition, and then I went back and got a master's, and then I got a PhD, all in nutrition. And I started working at a functional medicine lab. And I worked there. We did, all sorts of nutritional tests. I worked on the first publicly available microbiome test for clinicians, probably 15, 20 years ago. And so using 16S to look at gut bacteria, but also looking at markers like inflammatory markers or digestive markers. And then, we'd always get samples at the lab, can you do my dog? And for a while they could, but then once we got bigger, we couldn't. But so this is the people lab. I know one time we did grizzly bear fatty acids, which was always kind of cool, which they're super high. And then we started thinking, well, why can't, maybe we can do our pets, but we didn't have a reference range. I have an old dog, Linda, and she's 17, but several years ago, she got kind of sick. Our joke is that she's applying for colleges now that she's 17. So, she had some health concerns, and I was like, well, I just need to test her. So, some of us at the lab just kind of got together and we're like, a lot of the tests that people do, if you're a researcher, you don't start out generally, with people. You usually look, they look in mice or move to rabbits or, bigger animals. And a lot of the research in people and their gut had been done in, especially dogs, and more is getting done now in cats. So then we just got together and we started, a couple of years ago, we started IPL, the Innovative Pet Lab, for dogs specifically and cats.
So, oh, and cats. I saw that announcement recently. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, we do. It's just easier to get dog samples. So, you can get those,
well, and when I do want to talk about what the process of collecting the sample, and because I know nothing about cats, I would imagine that if they go in their litter box, that would be like a contaminated sample. So you've got to sort of catch it clean. It can't touch anything.
No, it can have some litter on it. That's what took us a little bit longer, because we had to see how much of an impact does litter, make, and what kind of litter might have an impact. And so we need a small amount so we can just, take off and get to that core piece. So it didn't make as big an impact as we thought it would. So
okay.
I think for people with multiple cats, sometimes it can be a little hard to figure out whose is whose. So
got it. That makes sense.
Get it right when they, when they do it.
I do want to talk about the test, but I have to preface this with it's one of my personal rules to try not to be the smartest person in the room. And so I surround myself with people who are far more educated and have expertise in different subjects. But what that means is that I end up asking a lot of questions that hopefully aren't too basic for you.
No, I mean, I love basic questions because sometimes it makes you think about the way you phrase, you answer it makes you think, oh, wait, I forgot this means that, or, yeah. No, I never
Right,
want to be the
right.
smartest person in the room or claim to be it.
That said, we do have quite a few educated members and consumers that come into our lives. So I expect them to come on and ask you some challenging questions as well. Part of what I wanted to bring you on for was to explain how your tests work. I met Jamie and Lacey at the American Holistic Veterinary Conference in September earlier this year in Florida, and stopped by their booth. And absolutely, first of all, you have an amazing team. I love them. They're so fun and easy to chat with. But prior to that, I'd never heard of you, and I was only aware really of one other gut health sort of test on the market, which was the doggy biome or animal biome. And after a long conversation with them where they explained to me how the tests differ, I ended up getting both of the tests so that I could do a split stool sample. Before we get into any of that, can you sort of give us the very basic level of what your test was designed for and how it works?
Yeah, so our test, we always start, it's not standard veterinary assessment. It's not microbiome. It's not genomics. They're physiological markers. So we look at level of actual inflammation, like what's actually going on in the gut. So like if the microbiome might have some bacteria that are associated with inflammation, but do they have inflammation? So we're looking at that. We look at pancreatic activity. Is that functioning correctly? And you can see that in the stool. We look at, leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which can be impacted by diet or inflammation, other things, even secondhand smoke we've seen. So, but
how can you see signs of leaky gut in the stool?
Well, I mean, some of it you might not notice. So some of our tests, we recommend that you can do them on any dog to kind of see where they are. So leaky gut it's often associated with more because I'm doing my example of like your little villi. So gut villi are supposed to be tight together. So if they start to separate, things can get through. So they may be things that your immune system reacts to. So there could be inflammation, or there might be, more food sensitivity. So it's not always that, gluten is causing a leaky gut, but it may be you're more sensitive to that. So there could be skin conditions, there could be, diarrhea, there could be mood disorders. I don't want to say it's endless because some things are more common than others, but it's the gut, so it's connected to really everywhere.
Sure. And how is that different from the microbiome test that we have seen?
So the microbiome test is generally going to tell you these are the bacteria we commonly see in a healthy dog. And this is the bacteria combination we saw in your dog. So we need to, it either matches or it matches a little or not at all. And having a poor quality or, poor combination of gut bacteria can be associated to certain conditions because bacteria don't just live there. They, they make nutrients. They take the, stuff it gets and it makes other compounds that can be positive or not. So for the bacteria. So if you have some, a combination of bacteria that's going to cause inflammation, then, you could check that. So it really goes together well. And so in the human world, there are several labs that offer them all together. So it's a good combination. And I wouldn't call it a split sample, because in lab world, a split sample would be where you're taking, like you're comparing exact two things that are the same. Like if we were both looking at microbiome, you would compare that. So.
Oh, I see what you're saying. What's the correct terminology I should be using?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just looking at the two tests together. I don't know if, just making associations. But if we were both testing the marker, then it would really be more of a split sample, and you can see like what the difference is. It also depends on, how you set reference ranges. So that, in people and that makes a difference.
Got it. I want to talk about reference ranges a little bit. I'm curious if anyone in our audience has sent in a test with their dog's stool sample, which one it was, and if you actually got the results that you were looking for. Something that I chatted about with Dr. Lori Kosher, a few months ago on the hair analysis test that she offers and sort of does a consultation about the results, is how the reference range from my dog as a raw fed dog, which is not very common, differs from the other dogs that they have compared data against. Can you sort of talk about reference ranges and what, as dog parents, we should know when we're receiving results that are outside of those ranges?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem with people and pets. And, reference ranges are only as good as who you use to set the reference range. So, and most of the time, reference ranges are testing's meant to be for a broad audience. So, reference ranges get set on animals or people that are healthy and, that follow a normal diet usually. So it's not, because ideally what we'd like to do, it's, we have a whole spectrum of people who have different diets. We have, raw fed to vegan animals. So it would be best if we could get a reference range for each grouping, but that takes, a long time to get all the samples. So like, you do with people, you get the general reference range, and then you see where you fall in there. I would expect that raw fed dogs would likely have, it also, there's a lot of associations. If you're feeding your dog raw, you're probably pretty in tune to your dog and take really good care of your dog. So that also kind of, gets pulled up in that. So, I would think that you might score better on average than some of the other, dogs who just get kibble and, get one walk a day or something.
Oh. We are a food company, so I'm curious, do you have enough data to identify any patterns between dogs that are on certain diets and dogs at others, and the type of, in this case, inflammation markers that you're seeing?
I haven't had time to crunch any data at all. So I haven't really dove into it. Just a cursory look. It looks like raw fed dogs on general are doing better. But I haven't really jumped in to look and see what that is. I mean, and there's not a whole lot there's some research on raw fed dogs. And that kind of suffers too from like, this is normal, like their bacteria looks like this, but is that normal? But what's normal for a dog? So trying to look at those health associations. And in some, like in calprotectant is an inflammatory marker. There's, it can identify like inflammation that's food responsive or antibiotic responsive or steroid responsive, depending on how high, it goes. That's what, the higher it goes, the more extreme. But, with that food responsive, all they're doing is changing the protein. They're not, maybe changing the protein into kibble. They're not doing a whole lot. So, it's just not a whole lot of research to pull from. It's, like, I don't know if people, there's probably more. So, but dogs,
Sure.
there just hasn't been collected and, quantified as readily. So,
yeah. No, I mentioned that at the Fetch DVM conference that we were at this last weekend, one of the vendors had a cancer screening test, and I asked whether or not they were collecting data about what the dogs were eating, because there's, within the fresh food community, there's an argument that feeding fresh unprocessed foods might lower the risk of getting cancer, which, as we know, in both humans and dogs is so prevalent. And we often think diet related. And I was just so surprised that they weren't collecting that data. I just thought, like, oh my gosh, you could do so much with this. And even if they don't have the time to like compile it and analyze it, at least they have it all together.
right.
But hopefully they'll add that in.
Also, like, the people want to do a test, but do they also want to, like, at first I wanted like this big long survey, and it's like people don't want to do a half-hour survey to register their test. So now we're doing a voluntary survey. But yeah, that is surprising. I think some of those cancer tests are genetic screens and what are associations, but it would be perfect. My undergraduate was in degree dissertation or thesis was in colon cancer, and looking at colon crypts and diet. So if you had a genetic marker and you could see what people had, yeah, that would just give you a lot more information on how good your tests were too.
Right.
So maybe they'll
sure, of course. Oh, good. I'm starting to see some of the questions come in. So before tell us about, so what do we do when we get your kit? How does it work, and what do we need to do on our end, and when can we expect results?
Well, you're going to get, once you open it, it'll be just a box, and you'll open it up, and the first thing it's going to ask you to do is to register your test kit. So these numbers match. So don't forget that, because sometimes we'll get a tube that doesn't have a registration, and we might not be able to figure out whose poop it is. So you just have to, get your dog's poop, take them on a walk. We have a glove. We have, like, it comes with a little spork. We also have a little wooden spoon. Some people like the little wooden spoon. I'm pro spork. And you just get it in and fill it to the line. And then you put it in a little, like, there's a little biohazard bag. You put that back in the box and put it in the mailer and put it in your mailbox, and then it comes to us and you'll get results online. So it's pretty simple.
That's super easy. Yeah.
And it can sit out for a day. Like, if you forget to send it, it can sit out for 24 hours, and then you can send it. If you're not going to be able to send it, you can just put it in the freezer and it can hold there for a while.
Got it. It looks like, I'll just pull this up in case others are wondering. Michelle says, I mailed my test kit on Monday, but USPS didn't deliver it until today. Is that sample still going to be good?
It is still going to be good. We have dates in there. And so the lab, when they get it, if it's, beyond a certain date, they have all their secret algorithms they do. They don't like to tell us exactly how long things go, because then we'll tell people, and they're like, then people will keep cutting it to the edge, but it'll be fine. And if they're concerned at all, they'll ask you for another sample, but it should be fine.
Okay. Well, let's say, since we partner up and we are doing a giveaway with you guys, the test that you have offered is the immunity and inflammation test. Once somebody sends in their stool sample, what can they expect to see? What results do they see when they get them?
Yeah, so we have the 3 tests, and they each have 2 pairs of analytes in it. So in the inflammation and immunity, we're looking at calprotectant and secretory IgA. So calprotectant it's a marker of immune activity. It's specifically neutrophil infiltration into the gut lining. That's what it's identifying. So it's part of an S100 protein, so they're all different ones. But calprotectant is, a really good marker at looking at gut inflammation. And there's some really good research articles out there that kind of review it through different universities. In people, it can help differentiate IBS from IBD, so irritable bowel syndrome from inflammatory bowel disease. So dogs don't get syndromes, but so in dogs, it will help identify if your dog has any GI inflammation, because you can have GI inflammation and not know it. You could have you can have inflammation at really low levels in your heart and not know it increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. So you can have inflammation at low levels and not know. So it identifies if there is inflammation, and then if there is inflammation, it identifies that level of inflammation. So what we find is that it's responsive to different supplements. It's responsive to diet changes, and even lifestyle stuff. But so you can bring it down with support and anti-inflammatories and other things. There's like this is an article. I think it's it's Texas A&M College Station. And they put their levels of calprotectant into like the food responsive, antibiotic responsive, and steroid responsive. And my contention is that like it gets to a certain level and they're like, well, it's so high, we better give them steroids. And at some point there might be other significant symptoms. And I don't want to interfere, in an individual dog's care. But I think we see sometimes like, even though it looks kind of high, if your dog is just on kibble and doesn't get a lot of interaction, if you change its diet and change its lifestyle, you can see real responses. So, it's not like they're going to go on cortisol, or, if they don't, you can first try like, is lifestyle and diet going to make a difference? Even if you had to put your dog on something else, it would certainly help with that.
Sure.
So, and one of calprotectant's things is it can help follow treatment over time. Like what you're doing is getting better and inflammation's coming down. So.
How soon can we see the change in the stool typically?
Within a month or so, if you made drastic changes.
Okay.
It's not going to take a year. It's not going to, and it should be more than 6 months. Generally we're saying retest in 3 to 6 months. And you can kind of see the direction. Certainly by 3 months, you should be able to see the direction it's taking. So.
Okay. So the immunity and inflammatory test is calprotectant, and there was something else that you mentioned.
Yeah, there's secretory IgA. So,
right.
It's secretory. It's immunoglobulin A. So it's an immunoglobulin that comes out right within the mucosal lining. And it's really considered the first line of defense within, because inside your gut lumen is technically outside your body. So there's a lot of immune stuff going on there. Like, should we let them in? What's going on? So the secretory IgA is the first line of defense. It tends to react, it has, obviously a lot of nuances, but its big ones are parasites, pathogen, and food reactions. Those are the things that it reacts to. So if it's really high, it's reacting to something, which is not necessarily bad. You want it to react. If it doesn't react, that's a problem. So if it's high, you can kind of look for, why is it elevated? Is it really high and you need to track this down? Is it going to, kind of come down on its own? I always think of it like a gut temper. Like maybe you get really mad and it's like, okay, I
sure.
carry that. And then sometimes it can get really low. And that's like, if you've had a low grade chronic thing going on, you can only be the first line of defense for so long. And so you need to
Sure.
have to support that. And then, you know, things like Saccharomyces boulardii can be helpful. You know, different things can help build that up. So generally,
We have seen in our, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, you could, yeah, go ahead.
We've seen in our nutrition consultations, dogs that have certain protein allergies or intolerances talk about the IgAs and the how those can be higher when they feed certain proteins. I imagine that would be both the calprotectin and the secretory IgAs would show higher when that happens, when there's a protein intolerance.
It might, I mean, you know, calprotectin is really like white blood cell immune reaction that can be exacerbated by protein intake, and it can be, but it wouldn't be the first one. So you're going to use your secretory IgA first to go in there and take care of it. I was going to say that, like, young puppies often have elevated secretory IgA. So it's not, you know, you don't want to do it right. You know, if you test it and you have a young puppy and it's high, that's okay. Just like, you know, children, when they're born, their calprotectins are in the hundreds. You know, most adults, there's under 50, you could be 400 as a newborn. So yeah.
Is that just because they're being exposed to so many different things?
I don't know if it's that or if it's like just their immune system, like just stretching, like, you know, I'm getting out there. There's often, you know, more opportunistic bacteria that are a little bit higher too. So just, yeah, some caution with, you know, don't freak out if you test a puppy. We generally, you know, recommend waiting to their, you know, 4 or 6 months before you jump in there with that test.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's good to know. So you mentioned sometimes there aren't any clinical signs of inflammation, and that can be presented through testing these markers, which you want to know about because they could display risk for other things. But what clinical signs or might we see in dogs that tell us, you know what, we really should test to see what their calprotectin and secretory IgAs look like?
Right. I mean, I think of things like, you know, skin conditions, just GI upset. It's hard with dogs because, like, oh, you're, you know, if you think that their stomach hurts. So if they're, you know, more lethargic, maybe after a meal, you know, so that might be a thing. You know, besides skin conditions, they, you know, seem depressed. I mean, I've certainly had depressed dogs. So, yeah, so those, you know, like mood disorders, skin conditions, if they throw up after eating, and there's just part of it is there's those, that's kind of like why we want to collect some of those things. So those symptoms haven't been, a lot of the veterinary research is kind of like the human conventional medicine for people. They're looking for, do you have this condition? Not, are you developing this condition? Or are we going to catch it early kind of thing? So they're getting it when dogs are pretty sick. They've had a lot of weight loss, and, you know, weight loss is another one. But if you notice, you know, so some of it may be slow, like they've lost a little bit of weight, or, you know, I wouldn't even rule out like they can't lose weight, just things aren't working as well as you think that they would work, you know, kind of more lethargic, might vomit more, that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, sure. And you know, there are all these other factors that go into that, you know, not just diet and environment. But so let's say I send in my test and the results are that there are certain markers for inflammation in the gut. What kind of action do I know to take after that? Like, what do I do with that information?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would look at is diet. How am I going to change the diet? I would look at anti-inflammatory type products. that might be helpful. You know, we can look at, certain just like, polyphenols or anti-inflammatory type supplements. I usually would think, start with diet right away, like change the protein is one of the first things.
Okay. Change the protein because that particular protein could be causing the inflammation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it can lead to, if you're having an immune reaction, calprotectin wouldn't be the first thing, but I think that it's the easiest thing to make changes in. So I would get anti-inflammatory supplements. I think about, it depends on, where it is. Like if you're feeding some, raw, I would look at, certain vegetables or maybe blueberry, something anti-inflammatory, to see if that can be helpful. If there's any diarrhea, I might look at those type of things, see if, it can get something to soothe that. If secretory IgA is also elevated, it's going to be a little more significant. But, and I'd look at their environment. We do find like stress, like there's, one of our other markers is zonulin for leaky gut. And it, it's higher in people who smoke. So it turns out it's also, if your dog is in a smoke and filled environment, it can be higher in your dog too, even though they're not smoking.
Oh, interesting.
So, leaky gut, the things we think of in people, gluten can have an impact, but so can alcohol and NSAIDs like Advil, and smoking. So those lifestyles. So, usually we don't think of your dog as taking a bunch of Advil and drinking, but they could be in an area that has smoke in it.
Sure. And have you been able to look at the data at all of some of the dogs that you've gotten samples from? I mean, that's a really, really interesting thing to note. Like the secondhand smoke could have that effect.
Yeah, I mean, to me, anything. I mean, they're just like mammals. Their intestinal tracts, slightly different than ours, but they're mammals. So if smoking's bad for us, it's bad for them. So drinking's probably not good for them either. So,
okay, so here's a good question. On your website, you recommend using hydrolyzed protein to reduce inflammation. Is that a long-term or short-term recommendation?
It would be a short-term recommendation. I mean, then you could try to reintroduce stuff. And as some of the stuff, I think if you're feeding all raw, it's going to be different for what you're going to introduce. You might just change the protein. And some of this comes from, research articles. And so a lot of research is written by large pet food companies. And so changing that. And so it's just making the protein smaller so you don't have to break it down, because that can become a lot of work, breaking down the protein, and getting absorbed, getting things absorbed. Because if you can't break it down all the way and absorb it, it's left in the gut, and that can, then the gut bacteria can react on it. So,
yeah, no, that makes sense.
I was going to say pumpkin's one of the big things we think of for anti-inflammatories, carrots, blueberries, those kind of things.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it certainly depends on the diet that the dog is already on and how to make changes to that. We do our nutrition consultations weekly, and a lot of people that come to us who see that their dogs are experiencing inflammatory issues in the gut are often feeding a dry food. So we usually start with recommending that they remove the inflammatory ingredient. Just don't feed it at all and see if that makes a difference. and we do, this last weekend was an interesting experience for us attending the Fetch DVM conference, which was primarily conventional veterinarians. And we have worked mostly with holistic integrative vets who are also proponents of fresh food, but that certainly wasn't the case this weekend. And their go-to anytime they were presented with digestive issues was also like a prescription diet or unhydrolyzed protein. And when I would ask, like, then what? And they're like, no, that's it. That's just for life. And I think I try to make the connection, with the human side. I think that there are some times where we have to have a very limited diet so we can help the body calm down. But that's just no way to live, to have, 3 or 4 ingredients for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean if it's like an IgE is a true allergic reaction, and if that's the case, like, no, you can't have it anymore. You've developed this immune thing. But if it's just because your dog was stressed and then they had a poor diet, and I think that can change. You can improve it. I think, like you noted, you want to help with good stuff, but you also want to bring down bad stuff. And I think for some dogs, even like circadian rhythms, like, how freaked out is your dog? Like, how are you freaked out? Is your dog freaked out? Like, mammals do better if they know, like, when they're going to get up, when they sleep, when they eat, when they have bowel movements. I mean, all that, your dog likes to go the same time every day, roughly. It's the same thing. Like, if you get a headache from not drinking coffee in the morning, that's because your body's like, oh, I drink coffee every morning. So you know what? I'm going to make all those enzymes to take care of it. And one of the things those enzymes do is they shrink they'll shrink the blood vessels down. So because, they know it's going to happen. So if you get caffeine, it shrinks it down. So the enzymes will, like, hold it open. So if you don't get the caffeine, it just holds it open, and then you've got bigger blood vessels in your head and you get a headache. And
that's why it hurts.
Yeah. And it secretes it before you even drink the coffee. So, and that's the same for, like, all the like, your body likes that. Dogs' bodies are mammals, and they like that. Like, I get fed this time each day, not like whenever you get home, and, so. Yeah, I'm probably preaching to the choir with with your people.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have a lot of different people joining in, and I think sort of just a reminder, depending on where they are in their journey, there are some things that we even know for ourselves, but don't make that connection for our dogs. Kenzie says, I had no idea about Innovative Pet Lab until Real Dog Box shared about that. This is awesome. Great. We got mutual fans here. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about our giveaway winner and also a special promo that I just heard about you guys doing, but I want to bring one last question up. What can I do if the results come back normal, but my dog is still itchy?
Well, if your results for inflammation and immunity come back normal, you may want to do one of the other tests. I would think the leaky gut, like, if I had to start with, itchy in general, I'd probably start with the leaky gut. It looks at zonulin, which if zonulin's high, then your tight junctions aren't so high. And then it looks at antigliadin. So are you having a gluten reaction? And it's not the same as an allergic reaction. It's just within the gut lining immune reaction, and you can pull that back. So it's not like they're not going to have a reaction like an anaphylactic. But yeah, so I would start with that. If they're having that, and if all the tests come back normal, there's still other things, but I'm not sure what else I would go to first. Like, these are kind of a spread abroad thing. I would start with the comprehensive. Well, it's always like, I work at a lab. So yeah, I work at a lab, so I always like more tests because that's more information. But
sure, yeah. So this one has all 3 in one, just with one sample.
Yeah, just it's the same tube.
One sample.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have to send more stool in this one than the other ones?
No, you don't. And then we keep that stool.
I was laughing.
I was going to say, we keep it so,
Forever?
not, there's a, like, I think it's, I want to say 90 days. The lab's probably like, that's not right. They're going to call me. But we do keep it a certain amount of time. So if you were like, oh, I got these results and they're normal, can you go ahead and run the other ones? So what were you going to say?
Awesome.
Are you going to announce?
I was going to say, no, I was going to tell you a quick story about how when I first learned about feeding raw, one of the bigger benefits that people talk about is how stools are so much smaller than they used to be when they were on kibble, and also how they're less sticky. Like sometimes you don't even realize that that's poop. But there was this gentleman who had to get on a flight, and I guess he was walking his dog in the morning real quick, tied up his poop, put it in his pocket, went through airline security, got to his destination, and was like, oh shit, I have a bag of poop in my pocket. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, literally.
Are you a fresh food proponent? What do you feed your dogs?
I have like a local, like they fresh food thing here. I'm in Atlanta, so we use a local one. I have fed raw before. My husband, we had a boxer, and we just never had somebody with so many issues. And we're like, okay, we need to take the next step. So then the other dog was like, I'm not eating this if you're feeding her that. Okay. So I'm not currently. Yeah. Linda gets some. She's 17. She's kind of delicate. So, yeah. So maybe in college she can.
Yeah. I love that. All right, let's announce our giveaway winner. So earlier this week, we announced a giveaway. You guys are doing this really cool thing. Was it the 12 days of Christmas or 12 days of giveaway?
Yeah, we aren't. Lacey's doing all that work.
Yeah, I had to pull up the giveaway because I'm like, what are we giving away? So we announced a giveaway for one of your inflammation and immunity test kits. And that's what we spent quite a bit of time talking about earlier today, as well as a free dog nutrition course for dog parents, one that we just released just a couple of months ago. And after this weekend have gotten so much more interest coming from our dog community. But we had you guys enter for 2 days, and it looks like, let me pull up, we have a winner of the giveaway. Their handle is Jane Doe 86. Nicole Shields. Nicole, I hope you're in here. You are the winner. We to also post this to Instagram just in case you're not, but thank you for entering it. It looks like we had quite a few entries for this prize. In order to redeem the nutrition course, make sure you send us a message with your contact information. And does that go the same for you guys? Do you want us to just pass that on to you for this giveaway winner?
Just pass it on. Yeah.
Perfect.
You got it wrong.
Will do. And I also and I got a message from your team this morning that you guys wanted to extend a promotion to anyone that is listening in on this live.
Yeah, 25% off everybody who's come to this. Who didn't win a free one can have 25% off some testing. That can go for a single test.
Awesome. Or the comprehensive as well? The big one?
You can start with that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. Awesome. And I think the code that you're going to use is Real Dog Box. If you guys want to take advantage of this is an awesome deal. I agree with you that there are so many things that we're doing only after we see that our dogs have issues. And if we can get ahead of that with preventative wellness, either by way of what we're feeding and different changes to their environment, or simply just having the data the information, I think it's such a smart move. I'm really excited for you guys to grow and get your product out there, because I do think it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and yeah, we're hoping to expand, like do more tests, get more information. And I think if all the tests, because sometimes people be like, oh, my test, it came all back normal. And it's like, that's good. That means all the stuff you're doing is working and helping, your dog's gut and health stay good. So that's what you.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's peace of mind. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Betsy, so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys all for joining in. We will be replaying this both to Facebook and to our YouTube channel. If you guys want to follow us both on Instagram, we're at Real Dog Box, and you guys are at
Innovative
Pet Lab.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. You all have a good evening and a happy weekend. Bye.
Bye.